Hi, Homeworthy. Welcome to our home.
Come on in. We'll show you around.
You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story.
Hi, my name is VW Fowlkes. I'm an architect. I'm principal of the firm Fowlkes Studio, which I founded with my wife, Catherine.
Welcome to our home. We both went to architecture school, quote unquote, late. I started professionally as a singer-songwriter. I was in a band with my sister, and we were in Nashville, Tennessee, and New York City. But after, I don't know, about 6 or 7 years or so, I decided, you know what, I really just want to go to architecture school. And at that time, VW and I had met and were dating, and it was a shared interest of both of ours.
Yeah, the first night we met, we both confessed to each other that we wanted to go to architecture school, but we swore we'd never do it.
A lot of people
and then we kind of
warn
came
you
around
against doing it because it is such a long road and it's an expensive education and it is a tumultuous career. But we decided to do it anyway. So luckily we got into graduate schools in the same city. So I went to MIT in Cambridge and VW was at Harvard in Cambridge, but I'll let him speak for himself. But basically we moved there and just moved our whole lives there. And graduate school is all-encompassing, and it took about 4+ years that we were there.
I was a TV producer, and actually 9/11 happened, and I looked around the newsroom and decided that if this is not where I want to be now, it's not going to get any sort of more dynamic and more exciting, not to celebrate 9/11, but it was just sort of like everyone else was on fire with adrenaline and I was kind of like wanting to hide, and I realized it's probably not the place for me. So that's when I decided to give notice and apply to architecture school. Now we're in our away room, and we think it is important to have a place where you can go and take a private conversation or do a puzzle or something away from all of the hustle bustle of the rest of the house. And this is especially important when houses are getting more and more open. Kitchens and dining rooms and living rooms are all kind of becoming one space. And so these more intimate spaces are even more kind of important to have.
And especially important in a small house too. Even if it's not that large, it's just psychologically a place where you can retreat maybe from the fray or the party or what have you.
When we first moved into this house, there was a particular light fixture that was very in vogue. This is like 15 years ago. And I went down to the basement of our office building where our company is. And I found in the corner this like 1960s
Sputnik
chandelier, which now again seems dated, but it was just one of those kind of pay dirt moments where I found the exact light fixture that Catherine was looking for then.
Yeah.
It's still here.
And the price was right.
I love these relief panels that Catherine found at a junk shop. Probably came out of a church. It's pretty good plasterwork, and I love the way they've been sitting on our mantle for a number of years.
I love them too. I wish I had there were a few more. I wish I had bought them all. But I particularly love the color of it, which is just really subtle. And it's mostly about the shadow and the movement of all the bodies. It's a little unusual, but I love it. I also want to point out this drafting table that we use as kind of a puzzle table or just to have lots of books on. But this is what architects used to use to do drafting. And of course, that's all done on the computer for the most part now. And we do some sketching. But we don't need a table like this that can angle and in the same way. But I love the lines of it. I love the story behind it. You know, you can just imagine how much work went on. So this actually we found in the barn of a family property. And so sort of gave it a light sanding. And now it looks kind of beat up all over again. But
Record player is an important thing to have. It requires when we play music. And also, oddly enough, because the sound is localized, it doesn't fill up the whole house. It draws you into the room. And you can still hear it in the other room. So it kind of enlivens the room even when you're not here.
I'd like to point out also, there's just a few other sort of things in the room from our travels, or even just from the, maybe a hike in the woods, but, things like dried flowers. But this also is really special to me. This is a sculpture done by my sister, Edie Ottestad, and she has done a series of these kind of abstract heads. And sometimes they get quite large, and they're really stunning. But she also has done them in this size as well. And I love seeing that when we walk by and come in this room.
Early on in our relationship, we found a print in her parents' attic. It is here. And it's a Mangold print. They bought it, Catherine's parents bought it at an auction, but it was kind of under a bed or something. We love it. We put it in a frame, or maybe the frame was already there, but we've been hanging in an apartment for our whole marriage. And one of our clients saw it in the background and said, my dad printed that. His father was a well-known printer and artist in his own right. But it was sort of fun to make that connection.
This is a corner cupboard. The funny thing when you build a house like this and use a lot of cabinetry to divide spaces, you don't have a lot of corners. So not having a lot of corners was a head scratcher where to put a corner cupboard. So this room really seemed like almost the only place for it in the house. But I do love the tone of the wood and the patina. And then on top of it, again, something a little unusual, it is a ship. And I found it at a flea market, sort of barn sale. But I thought the lines were quite beautiful.
This chair has always been here, and it's a child's chair, and it is a place where you can put your shoes on. It also sometimes collects mail. It's a funny little thing to have here.
But it gets a lot of use.
It does.
This rug was my sole purchase when I went to Round Top, Texas. For sort of, I don't know if you're familiar with Round Top, but it's a fantastic destination. I recommend it to everyone. I certainly will be going back, but this is the one thing that I couldn't leave without. I don't know much about it. The dealer, I didn't get sort of the story behind it. So it was really more about the colors and the size that drew me to it.
We've always had this little primitive house on our mantle. It's concrete. And it has these embossed, just suggestions of windows. And of course it has the this hallmark pitched roof. And it could not be more primitive in its construction. Just a solid block of concrete, but so expressive and obviously such a strong symbol of house. And anyway, it's always sat there. These two bowls Catherine found at a market in Mexico City when we were there with our family. If you've ever been to a market in Mexico City, it's actually a pretty impressive feat to find something that is not very, very colorful. But leave it to Catherine. She likes to find her kind of muted, neutral tones. So she did it. And they have these really expressive kind of primitive drawings on them. The table, I think, came from an auction near where my mother was a dairy farmer in eastern Pennsylvania. And there was an auction house nearby that we would go to and find all sorts of funny things that came from who knows where. You'll see that this wall here leaves a gap in the corner. And that is a slight kind of visual and acoustic connection into our dining room, which is on the other side of this wall.
This is the entryway into our house. It hasn't really changed dramatically in terms of the architecture. The stairs still is what it was. We painted it, which makes a big difference. But of course, the artwork and some furnishings in the entrance. This is a painting by artist Edith Coonley that we love. She's also my mother. And I would say the front door is something that we spent some time designing and getting just right. It is made out of reclaimed wood. We didn't want it to feel too shiny or stuffy or anything like that. Another thing that we did in the entrance when we renovated is we did a lot of defining spaces by millwork, which is cabinetry, rather than only relying on walls. And so the things that you see here on either side are cabinets that house coats and mail and dog leashes and all sorts of things. And so that created more of an entry than we previously had. The problem with some small houses is that when you open the door, you kind of fall into the living room. And so we didn't have a lot of space to work with, but we wanted to define an entry in some ways. So those are some of the things that we did. I'll also point out that this millwork or cabinetry that I'm referring to is doing a couple of things. It's also hiding the HVAC for this floor. So down below, the ducts are coming through the floor. And so we routed out some squares, grid underneath so that the airflow can come through without having to put a big vent in the floor.
The other thing we have in this room is this little drawing by my mother of a dead soldier with the helmet on their chest. Kind of an odd way to enter the house, but it's a drawing that Catherine and I both thought was compelling. It's a way to remember her anyway. We lived in a great apartment downtown and had a child that needed a little bit more elbow room. And we were so poor, we couldn't afford a house, but we found a building that was not quite a house. It was the smallest house in the neighborhood, and it gave us a backyard, and it had a Gaudi-esque concrete drip sculpture in the backyard, but it was in the right neighborhood. And we immediately had an idea of how we could make it work for us.
That's true. When we saw it, we looked at every house in Washington, but when we saw this, which was in our price range, but it also had potential in a way that we were looking for. Well, right away, we basically just gave it a facelift. We painted it inside and eventually outside, but we really just moved in and lived here for at least 5 years or so. And there's really never a good time to renovate, but we just decided finally to pull the trigger. And we're so glad we did. And we really transformed the house with the renovation and the addition.
Yeah, we doubled the size of the house. We put in several new bathrooms. Once we put in a bathroom for the boys, Catherine said, "I'm never going to set foot in this room." And so we made a proper primary suite. And a kitchen that was open and one which that you could do dishes and still kind of, be part of the family dynamic.
I would say it is eclectic. I think we are both architects and interior designers, and so we do this for our clients all of the time. But it is very different when we're doing it for ourselves. I would say some things are very intentional, and we typically can reach an agreement, but a lot of it is not intentional and organic and changing.
If you're driving down like a country highway and you see a shack on the side of the road that looks like it's full of junk, you'll probably see Catherine there like rifling through like used silverware and like boards that were pulled off of a house somewhere. And the more beat up it is, the more interested she is in it. And so we have a lot of stuff that's kind of repurposed and given new life around the house.
But I've learned my lesson. If you can't sit in it, like if you break it when you sit in it, we're not allowed.
She has not learned that lesson.
We're not allowed to bring more of that into the house. Here we are in the dining room or the dining space, but we knew when we were renovating the house that we wanted to have the table here. And this wall that VW was explaining, rather than have it meet the side of the house, we held it back because we also knew that it would probably be an art wall. And because it is held off, it gives the sort of impression that it might even be a little bit grander or taller space, a little bit less residential. And the painting behind VW is also by Washington, D.C. artist Edith Cooley. And I think it really looks fantastic there. I'd also want to talk about this mirror that is on this wall opposite the table. It's unusual to have a mirror like this that's quite low. This came out of a client's house that we were renovating, and they had no interest in it. And so this typically goes over a pier table. It would be a very tall space, and the mirror would be sort of more at eye level. I loved just how sort of odd and eclectic it was for this house, because it clearly is not something that you would find that came with the house. So we paired it with the dining room table, which is a mid-century Saarinen dining table. But the sort of happy accident is that when we're sitting at the table, the mirror is at eye level. That seems like it all made sense, even though it was kind of an accident.
Like other things in the house, the light fixture I found in a actual dumpster behind our old apartment downtown. I think a club, like a nightclub, had gone out of business, and they threw away like dozens of these Artimity fixtures. So we snagged a few. This bureau is something that was my father's bureau growing up, and it I think is kind of one of those pieces that has survived in our family for a few generations or longer than that. I don't know the full story, but it's always been kind of considered a special piece for us growing up. So I was lucky enough to wind up with it here.
Also defining the dining room, again, as this idea of these millwork cabinets rather than walls. And so the space is kind of doing multiple things. It's a dining room, but it's very much circulation here. And we have a powder room tucked over here beside the side entrance. And I will point out that before we renovated and added on, this really was the end of our house. So you get a sense of how small it was. And our kitchen was in this space that's now our powder room. So you can imagine how small that kitchen was.
We also have a couple of family pieces that I inherited, and a couple of sort of classic modern pieces that we collected over the years. We love our, classic Saarinen dining room table and our Mies van der Rohe chair, and so it's really a mix. We do not believe in purity. It's a real eclectic kind of environment.
I would say that there is a sweetness to the house, the scale of it, the overall feel. We've certainly changed the house, but it has retained that feeling. It feels somewhat timeless. There are moments, especially when the kids were little, where the house felt old-fashioned in a comforting way, but there's certainly nothing too specific about that. It's a house that is casual, it is intentional, but there's an informality and a sweetness to it that I just love.
I think I love it partly because it's got Catherine's touch everywhere, and that makes it a very comfortable place for me. I also love it because it tells the story of our lives and our relationship as houses should do. We try to kind of do that with our clients. So it doesn't feel like we furnished it in one day from a single catalog. It has a lot of personal, it has a lot of things in it that have personal value to us and are and represent us. And so as a result, it feels eclectic and feels
like it couldn't be anyone else's house.
Yeah. When we're talking about public spaces in houses, it's very important to have a circuit where you never get going into a dead end. So here we have an entrance into our main living room, but there's always a back door out of it, which is through the kitchen and through the space in between the island and the pantry. This is our living room and our kitchen. One room, two spaces, and they're kind of differentiated by the presence of the island, this kind of monumental stone top here, and also the two entrances, which allow it to feel like two different rooms, as well as two doors to the outside. Even though they're right next to each other, one clearly feels like a kitchen door and one clearly feels like a living room door.
When we were adding on, we designed it, we drew it, we knew what we were going to do, but when we actually had a huge hole in the ground, we were sort of standing in this space outdoors, and we thought, you know what, it's not quite right. And so we decided to add 18 inches more to the back of the house, which was a pretty big thing to do in the middle of construction. But I think about that all the time when I'm sitting in this room, and I'm so grateful we did.
This large light rice paper light here, it really is a powerful gesture to kind of unify this space and define this as the living room, even though it's contiguous with the kitchen. It does not feel like you're kind of cooking in the living room or vice versa, hanging out in the kitchen.
The coffee table, it's cement, and we wanted something kind of neutral, but that was large enough because we knew we had this seating on all sides. And we also love books, especially art books. So there is a lot of evidence of that here. Anytime we travel or go to a museum, you'll probably see a book on the table from that. We also have lots of little pieces of pottery. Some of them are quite beautiful, done by real artists, and some of them are just kind of noodles that maybe I was playing around with, experimenting. And then my favorite are some that the kids made. So we like to kind of have them sprinkled all over the place. So it's high and low, but they're all beautiful.
Looking out toward the backyard, we tried to make it as glassy as possible. A lot of clients ask for walls that can open up so you have full continuity to the outdoors. In this case, it would have made it too difficult to furnish the room. Having a fully open wall doesn't make sense in this climate, except for just a few days a year. And so we were very happy just to have a small swing door and then a wall of glass that we could have kind of furnishings up against. We did want to have the glass wall as clean as possible, and so we actually pulled the structure out of the wall and inboard of the room a little bit. So the structure and the rear wall are separated here, and this fire pole kind of serves as an object in the room.
This painting, I think, is successful for many reasons. It is also by Washington, D.C. artist Edith Kunle. But the scale, I think, is really important. And we suggest this to our clients a lot, that smaller spaces to play with scale so that you can do something really oversized or sometimes something really undersized. But the scale of it, I think, was so successful. And of course, I love it because it is painted by my mother. But it's also a little less typical of her current work, which I think is also interesting as well. This is another family piece from VW's family. It's a little bit, more formal than some things that we might have bought on our own, but I love that mix. And again, it's kind of paired with things that we have found or maybe foraged on our own. Some artwork. And some objects. I'm not quite even sure what this is, but I absolutely love the color of it and the size, so that lives there. The living room and the kitchen are really open to each other, so that was something to wrap our head around, how we wanted them to speak to each other. The island really defines the spaces, and there are all sorts of ways to approach designing an island. We knew we did not want seating at the island. We were really clear about that because we didn't want anything to take away from the dining room, using it, really activating it. We wanted that to be where people gathered and did homework and all of that. And it's so open to everything else. But because the island was such a presence in the quote-unquote living room, we also didn't want to make it look too much like a kitchen. And so we just thought about that in the way we chose to detail the countertop and the hardware we used. We decided to paint it in the field rather than have the cabinetry sprayed at the cabinet shop. So it also feels a little bit more like furniture that maybe you'd find in your house. It certainly gets nicked up, but we can just touch it up ourselves. Another thing with the island is nice to have a place for cookbooks. So we carved out a space here that's easy to access, but it's kind of subtle. I think one big move in the kitchen was creating this ribbon window that goes underneath a lot of the upper storage. And that was for several reasons. We obviously wanted light in the kitchen, but we didn't necessarily need to be staring at our neighbors or have them staring at us. Also, in the certain seasons, there's a wisteria vine that blooms like quite along this horizontal line, and it's very beautiful. So above that are the cabinets that aren't attached to the wall, the side walls or the ceiling. So that's a composition there, but can't really resist putting things there. So that's also another depository of items from our travels or pottery that we've made or old silver from our families, drawings from the kids, all sorts of things like that. But it's nice to have them very much in the mix of our day-to-day lives. So we see and touch them all the time.
There's a little bottle of liquor that's been there for years, and I kind of think of it as a constant test for our children. We'll know when they've come of age, when that is mysteriously disappeared.
Well, on that note too, my son's fake ID was on the refrigerator. I found it in his room years ago and I put it on the fridge. I thought, oh, that's the perfect place for it. So we all laugh every time we look at it. The range hood you can detail it all sorts of different ways. We wanted it to be pretty quiet and disappear. So we just boxed it in and have it separate from the upper cabinets. Another thing that's a little unusual, and we sort of used our own house as a test for things that we were interested in that we might not necessarily feel comfortable recommending to clients. But one of them is backsplash. And so behind the stove gets really messy and dirty. But rather than have the whole thing tiled or have stone all behind it, it just felt just not quite the spirit of the house. And so we just put an old cutting board behind it that can handle all the splatter and grease. And that suits us fine. You can also see lots of other old cutting boards that we have and we collect, and we use them all, and they're great for entertaining as well. This rug I found also in an antique store. It's a runner, which is sort of a long rectangular shape. And I can't really resist buying whenever I see a runner, I can't resist. They just define spaces really well. I find them really flexible, and it's just a great thing.
And we're not fussy about things. So sometimes we'll have the dog tears up the rug. Catherine's parents' dog comes up and tears up the rug also. And we just kind of let life happen. And and when it becomes too much to bear, we'll replace it. But that goes with the rugs and the floors and the countertops, and we kind of feel like these things are meant to be used.
It is almost an arranged marriage. Our parents were friends before we were born, so that's kind of the family story. Our parents were friends probably in the 60s and 70s, and lost touch with each other over the years. And I think I was moving from Nashville, Tennessee, up to New York, and my family ran into VW's mom, who's quite a character, and she declared that either I or my sister were going to marry one of her sons. So we all agreed, and then I moved to New York, and pretty soon after we met, and that was that.
The story I heard is my mother ran into her parents, and after not having seen them for probably 2 decades, and said, "Okay, what do you got?"
And our parents said, "This is who we have."
It worked out.
We love to be able to have large gatherings, not have to move things around. So the flow, I would say, accommodates that. Definitely outside as well as inside. But it wasn't something that we stated. I guess it was just kind of instinctive.
Yeah, I mean, I think our goal was, or one of our goals was that all of the rooms and all of the spaces are used, have a lot of kind of action. And so it's pretty open, it flows, yet each of the spaces has its own character. And no space feels too remote. And although we do kind of treasure
Or
the
too
more
fancy,
intimate spaces, but it's pretty low key.
A conversation we have with our clients all the time is, do you want a dedicated dining room, or do you want something open to the rest of the house? And so those types of questions about how you live, we have those every day with our clients. And so when it came to our own house, we certainly had space constraints, but we were able to sort of have it both ways. We have an area that's clearly dedicated for dining, but it is somewhat open to the rest of the house, for example.
This is where we eat sometimes in the summer. The table we inherited from a client. We have to kind of refinish the top of it every few years. The wisteria and trumpet vine, which hangs over us, is a great shade and space maker. It grows very fast. It's a source of many a marital argument, but it does add a lot to the character. And our garage, which is filled with garage stuff, really is a great kind of buffer between this dining area and the alley. And just by putting a new door on the garage, it kind of elevated its facade and kind of created a nicer sense of continuity between the garage and the house.
When we were designing this rear space, when we did our renovation and addition, we weren't quite sure. We knew we wanted to give a little bit of lawn for the kids, and we wanted sort of a hardscape area, but we settled on pea gravel. It's really affordable. I think it's quite romantic and beautiful, and really flexible. But that's another thing that we did sort of out of budget constraints, but I'm really glad we did it because I love it. The furniture it's pretty eclectic. These are meant to be outside so they can handle the weather. These less so, but I love the way they look. So they live here. Again, those were from one of my favorite antique shops in the area called Exeter Antiques. And I love going to her barn sales, and that's where those came from. And this is really the best vantage point to see the addition to the house. So VW said that we almost doubled the size of the house. We came out in this direction, but rather than continue with brick, we knew we wanted a different material. This is a stained wood, and we call the siding a rain screen. So there's gaps between it so water and air can circulate behind it, but the house itself is waterproof. But I think it gives a nice texture to the facade rather than maybe a less dynamic deployment of the material.
Yeah, really the story of our house, particularly the front elevation, is a story of paint job.
Yeah.
It was a red brick, not a very attractive red brick. We decided to paint it a dark gray. We even discussed black, but we settled on a dark gray, and it nearly broke the internet. Turns out painting brick is a very controversial thing.
People feel really strongly that you shouldn't paint brick, but I think in some cases it's a wonderful thing to do. It's really can transform a house. We also, when we painted the exterior of the house when we moved in, it made a big difference. I think it kind of unified everything. And then years later, when we decided that we were going to renovate, we changed all the windows, and that was also really transformative. So I think that combination of the paint and the new windows, and then of course this new custom door, really elevated it. It's a very humble, very modest house, but I think some of those moves were just thoughtful and really appropriate to the house.
We're really comfortable here.
Yeah. I would say that home means to me family, primarily, but also self-expression. So to be able to have your home represent who you are and have that somewhat projected to other people when they come in. They understand that.
I think home also has an element of safety. And by that, I don't just mean strong doors, but a place where a family can feel comfortable being themselves and expressing themselves, and a place where it's easy for them to be together.
Thank you, Homeworthy. We've loved showing you our house.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to go to homeworthy.com for exclusive content, shopping guides, and so much more.